Hey, it's Amity, welcoming you to the Gothic Heart, where we explore how to fully embrace your Gothic and alternative self in love, life, and everything in between. Whether you're navigating the dating scene, in a relationship, or celebrating your individuality solo, this is your spot for tips, inspiration, and my own journey from a courtroom attorney to a hollow wedding host. So grab your favorite drink and let's dive in. Welcome back to the Gothic Heart. Thank you everybody so much for being here. Today we have a recovering attorney, much like myself, Kristen Swinehart here, who is now turned psychic medium and channels celestial beings. So we are going to have an amazing conversation today, not the least of which has to do with our commonality in leaving the law. So, but also the channeling of archangels. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Kristen and let her give you all of the much more lengthy introduction and what we'll be talking about today. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here, Kristen. Go ahead.
Thank you, Amity. I'm kind of chuckling to myself as you give that description, because if you would have asked me 20 years ago, if you would have said that she went from an attorney to channel celestial beings, I would have been like, what does that even mean?
Well, great. Tell us.
Yeah, I would never have known. So, I started practicing law. I went straight from undergrad into law school. I just thought that's what you did. Both my parents were attorneys. I mean, I was interested in the law. I wanted to work in sports and entertainment. So that was my choice to go to school. It wasn't like I was forced to go to law school. And I got out in the real world, started practicing law. I did work with an NFL agent, which was really cool, except he also did wills and probate. So I don't know if your legal experience was, once you get out, you kind of have to take the lesser of the good jobs. So I practiced wills and probate for a little bit, and now the irony of that when I look back. But I hated it. I hated it because I really wanted to work in sports and entertainment. I wanted to do more with contracts. So it didn't take me too long before I was like, this just isn't for me. And one of the key points I should really say is my father passed away when I was 18. And this was like, at 18, I couldn't believe, I was like, so we just live and then we die. Like, that's it. Like, it didn't really make a lot of sense to me. And I started to question a few things then. But then once I started practicing law, I was like, so we live, we do these jobs we hate, and then we die. And my dad loved his job, but I couldn't see doing this for another 40 years and just trying to make it through every day. So I left, and I've had a myriad of different jobs, from sales, primarily all within kind of sales-based positions. But through all of this, I somehow stumbled upon a personal development course, and that was interesting. And then started reading more books on personal development. All of a sudden, all these different paths opened up, and I just took every breadcrumb and started learning all kinds of things. And that was when I was 25. And so here we are many years later. But I just kept following all these breadcrumbs, which ultimately led me to discovering that I can communicate with people who have passed, which was mind-blowing in and of itself. And this was just about 5 years ago now. And then just last year, I discovered I could communicate with angels, and even just in the last couple of months, I've just been diving deeper into what other beings I can connect with and get messages from. So that's a summary of the last, 20 years, but you get the idea.
Yeah, that's so exciting. Much of it is similar to my path. I had taken 2 years of a break before I went to law school after undergrad, and then left. I fell into, well, side note, not that anyone else will care, but I was actually president of the Sports and Entertainment Society in law school, because that's what I was sure I was doing. I did the sports law moot court competition in New Orleans, all the things. But then my real passion was criminal defense and death penalty and stuff. So it's not where I ended up, but I fell into corporate bankruptcy for the first couple of years, and then I did criminal defense. So, and not that I didn't like it for that time, but then my life changed, had children, a whole bunch of things, right? And then I did a myriad of sales-related careers. So, and then sort of am finding my path now here. I graduated college almost 25 years, or not, high school almost 25 years ago. So, very similar type of type of thing. But I, have always had these interests in things, but didn't get to learn more or haven't exactly discovered anything that I have. So I'm really enjoying learning from the guests that I keep having and people that I keep meeting what they do. So I cannot wait to hear how the personal development or how you even discovered this. Like, am I missing something, or is somebody who's listening maybe going to see the signs or anything? So I'm ready.
Sure. So I didn't even know what a medium was. I didn't even know that there was this whole other world. That was like new news to me. I always just felt like something was missing and I couldn't figure out what that was. So I became a health coach at one point because super passionate about health and wellness. And I do have extensive knowledge in all of that. But even when I became a health coach, I was like, something's missing because I thought I was going to be super happy once I did this because I was like, oh, this is it. And so it felt like I was closer, and I still always just recognized the nudge of like, there's still something else missing. And again, just more books, more courses, meeting more people, all kinds of different modalities. And all of them were very interesting to me. Every time I found something new, I was like, well, I wonder what this will do. So I've been really curious. And somebody once told me, they're like, well, you definitely are a very curious person. And that is true. So I've been using that to just kind of follow these different paths. And 5 years ago, I was doing some work with a Peruvian shaman, and in that, they do like a little ceremony. And in that ceremony, I was there with a friend, and I knew about his grandmother who had passed, but I didn't know all the details of her. And in that ceremony, I started describing her, or some information came to me. I can't remember exactly what it was. And I said, does this make sense for your grandmother? He's like, oh, yeah, that was exactly like whatever it was. And I was like, whoa, how would I have known that? So then I went and asked the shaman, I'm like, do you think it's possible that I'm a medium? And keep in mind, at this point, I have figured out what a medium was. That was now a word that was in my vocabulary. And he's like, yeah. And then I said, well, I think I'm afraid of it. And he's like, mm-hmm. And so that's how that ended. Like that was like as deep as I got that night. And then I just went and started, the lawyer and me researching mediumship, people, classes, things, that research skill never goes away. Yeah.
Never. I research everything.
The more information I can find, down which rabbit hole. So I took a class by a woman who used to be very high up in the Navy. And she discovered she was a medium later on in life. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to learn from anybody, this left brain woman I'm going to relate to, it's not so far out there. It's not, because where I came from, like this stuff was not something people talked about, and so I thought, well, I need somebody that's like logical, that I'm going to trust. And after taking that class and then started, practicing, I realized like, wow, I actually can do this. And during COVID, I would get friends on the phone and be like, all right, let me just try this out. Like, let's see if we can connect to your grandmother or whatever the case may be. And so then through COVID, I discovered like, yes, I was doing this. And then people started paying me for it, which was super exciting. And it kind of started from there.
That's such an organic and perfect way for it to happen. And it's funny you talk about the researching and the rabbit holes, because literally me too, to a T. Like I feel like I researched when I was first having my first child, I was pregnant. Like I feel like I researched the strollers for like 80 hours. Like I cannot research anything. Doesn't matter what the topic is, enough. Like I have to have all the information, like you were saying.
And I like that you put an hour mark on it. Like that's such a lawyer thing. Well, I probably spent about X amount of hours on this one subject.
every 6 minutes, I checked in and I billed my time. No, it's totally true. And you touched on something actually that regular listeners will know, because we talk about it in pretty much every episode, because it's just such a common theme, is how you said how it's not talked about where you come from or where you were brought up, or especially with lawyers. Like my mom is a doctor and my dad is a physicist and my husband is a physicist and a mathematician, right? So like I totally get what you're saying. So I know the struggles I had expressing my interests or things when I started to change, and things like I've talked about it ad nauseum on the show, so I'm not gonna bore people. But so what kind of experiences did you have, or even just with any friends that you have that are more like, did you get, scoffs and, oh, what do you can't do that, or those types of things? And if you did, how did you work through them? Because we talk about that a lot here.
I mean, probably by this point, some of the people that were more in my circle were open and understood and like thought it was really cool. And then there's also people who, like there's somebody from where I came from who told my mom I was doing the devil's work. So I did get a little bit of that, but I always look at it as I'm only here to help people, and that's what my intention is, and that's why I do this. I'm not trying to convince anybody one way or the other that they need to believe what I do. There are plenty of people that do, and if I try to go and change the people that don't, like maybe they'll have an experience where they change their mind, but that's not what I'm looking to do. So I look at it that way. And then a really great story was actually, I told my mom about this. She's like, "Oh, that's interesting." I actually think my grandmother, her mom, was very intuitive, and not I think, I'm confident that she had a lot of these abilities. It just wasn't something that we really realized. So my mom actually held my first group mediumship reading in her law office. So she invited her
Aw.
friends and people that wanted to come. And my mom was like, she's like, "I can't believe," she said, "sometimes I don't know when I tell people what the reaction's going to be." She said, "But more people are into this than you would think." And I was like, yeah, it's kind of shocking. Like when you start to tell people, they're like, "Oh my God." Some people might look at you sideways, but then there's a lot of others who are actually like very interested.
I love that. In this day and age, well, especially with all the new for pun mediums out there, for not medium
Right.
psychic mediums, but the other mediums of people to reach that are just, newspapers and books. There's so many more people that are able to share their interests. I feel like, yes, we are so much more open-minded. So I love that. I mean, that is so cool. So that is props to your mom. That's an amazing thing that she did. I mean, there
Yeah.
are a lot of people I have on whose parents would not do that at all. So that's really exciting.
Yeah.
So, all right. So you were with, talking with friends, you learned what you could do, you've done it on the phone. Well, I actually have a quick side note. How did you even
Sure.
end up at a Peruvian shaman? Like, how did that come about?
That was always very interesting too. So, and I feel like I say this a lot, but like following the breadcrumbs has been really a key piece for me. And so I was in some type of group call on Saturday mornings, and this woman said that she was going to go to this ceremony thing. And earlier in the week, I heard somebody else talking about the same thing that I had never heard about. And then that was like the first one was a Wednesday. Then this woman's talking on a Saturday. And I was like, what in the world? Like, I've never heard of this. And I've heard about it twice in 2 weeks. Like, don't be stupid. Just ask more? So I did. And that's how, and I went to that ceremony with her. And that was, like almost more than 10 years ago. And so I just discovered like that was like 5 years in of doing this work that I then discovered the mediumship. So I just kind of like when things get repeated or you hear,
Mhm.
when somebody mentions a book like several times or you see it and you're like, okay, if I've seen it that many times, like pay
It
attention.
means something.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I looked at that as a sign to like, all right, well, maybe you should go to this. And so that's how I ended up there was just, again, being curious and paying attention to the signs. But I didn't even know that that was like a thing, you know?
But you are so right. I've heard that multiple times from people, and it's even my story too. It's just like not just ignoring the signs or making a simple justification for what it was, like actually paying attention and following them. Like that's literally how it happens for everybody. So I love that that was the advice that you just shared too. Okay, so I know that was like a little side
Oh,
tangent. So
yeah.
back to, so you were helping your friends and using your medium abilities. So how did you learn, or how did you even discover the celestial beings part? I'm very excited to dive into that.
Yes. So I was at a retreat about a little over a year ago, and there was a medium there who was the facilitator, and she was actually doing a reading for me, which I always enjoy that when I get, to have the experience of somebody else to give me the reading. And through that reading came that I could channel Archangel Raphael. And I'm like, okay, that sounds like that could be interesting, but I don't even know who that is or what that
Yep.
means. And that's the thing again, like I am just as naive to all this stuff until the moment it's like happening. I'm like, okay, let's give that a shot. Um, so there was a point where I said, well, okay, I'll try that. And, I felt like the container that we were in was safe and that it was a good place to do that. And so I actually trans channeled, which means that the celestial being like comes into your body, but it was like I was on the side of it. So I could hear what Archangel Raphael was saying. I could tell it wasn't in my voice. I knew those were words I didn't even know how to use. And then there were other participants in the retreat who like watched the whole thing. And then they were like, oh my God, that was like really incredible. And then the following day, and it was kind of like this whole healing session thing that I didn't know how to do. The following day, one of the girls came to me who was a nurse and said, Kristen, I've been having this infection on my finger. And I thought for sure I was going to have to get an antibiotic. And she said, it's gone. She's like, it's been like, it went away. And I was like, whoa, that's pretty crazy if that's what just happened. So It was through that whole experience that, I mean, it was undeniable for me that there's no chance I could have like stepped aside, heard a different voice coming out of my mouth and words that were like, whoa. So, yeah, I guess I was just open to the experience and it was pretty cool.
That sounds so cool. And yes, being open, I mean, that's the other thing, right? I mean, how many people are losing out on certain things just because they have no interest in even opening their mind like the slightest little bit. So, I mean, okay, that's so cool. So, but that was done with someone else, like kind of helping you or guiding you or anything. So, obviously, I'm sure you researched more into it. And so, how does it work for you now? Like, this is something you still do, and now you're looking into other beings, right? So,
Correct.
I know Raphael is one that you have a connection with and everything. So, is that something you use with your company or with your with your clients, or is that something that you just use on your own? Or let me know how it goes.
Sure. So I've done a lot of group mediumship readings. So people will go there
Okay.
and I'll bring through past loved ones and figure out, where it goes in the audience. However, what I started doing was like, I was like, well, let me just see if I can do these group Archangel Raphael sessions. And so a woman was kind enough who has like a metaphysical bookstore where I live invited me to try at her place. She invited some people to come to the bookstore. And I just did the Archangel Raphael first, and then I opened it up to the mediumship portion. And so what I found was that by bringing through the energy of Archangel Raphael, it raises the vibration of the whole group. So it makes it a whole lot easier to do mediumship messages as well. So I do like to do the Raphael sessions with groups, and I have done individual sessions, even remote, where I can do the work without even being on the phone with anybody. I just know who I'm connecting into. I'll take some notes and then I'll go back to the person and tell them what happened. And the first time I tried that, and I did this for a woman I know and for her daughter. And when I came back with the notes, I mean, I was like, I kept smelling fire, and come to find out the fire had a major piece of something that her daughter, was involved with. And it blew my mind and it blew her mom's mind. And I'm like, how in the world would I have gotten that? So it's those things too that always remain like, I remain in awe of what's actually possible when we connect with these higher beings. And so what I'm doing right now, I mean, I'm reading and listening to so much on channeling because that's what it is. We're just channeling this information. And what I'm also understanding is like, I look back and know that I've been able to do this my entire life. I just didn't know it. I would have information and, sit next to somebody on a plane that I've never met and give them a whole bunch of information just through conversation. They're like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I needed to hear today. And so now I realize that's what I've been doing my entire life. I just didn't know it.
Got it.
I just thought that that's
Mhm.
like what you do. So
Yeah, we justified it. Yep.
yeah. Yeah. So that's it. Yeah. Studying more and working with I do automatic writing now every morning as a practice, which means essentially, tapping in and letting whatever you're connected to, I mean, obviously beings of like love and light, not just any random thing, but come through and deliver the message. And it's fascinating.
And so you just basically, so every morning, and do you like comprehend it as you're going, or do you have to go back and read what you wrote?
So one of the things I've been learning is, so I would write it and then I would go back and I would hear what it was saying, but I wouldn't totally be like understanding all of it. So I would go back and reread it. But one of the things I've recently learned is like reading it out loud because then you hear it differently. So I've been adding that into it,
Mhm.
which is very interesting. And again, it's like those are not things that I would be writing out of my conscious mind, and one of the things that I recently learned was too, it was like, that this voice is not your own because often if it was your own voice, it would be saying like, you should be doing this, or you should, we don't talk as nicely to
Mhm.
ourselves as these other beings are talking
For
to us.
sure. That is for sure. Oh my gosh, something I deal with my oldest, my 9-year-old, all the time. She has the meanest inner voice to herself.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
but yeah, we are definitely. So I
Yep.
definitely, we do that. So then I just have a little, okay, clarification point. So with the medium work that you'd been doing, that's medium meaning connecting people with lost loved ones, etc., right? Okay.
Correct.
And so
Mhm.
the channeling is actually channeling these beings like through yourself. And so you said you would do that before because it would make the vibrations higher for you to be able to do your mediumship. So, I mean, I've heard you say it, but I didn't exactly understand what that meant.
Yes. So, and really, like, channeling can be mediumship, it can be angels,
Okay.
like, it can be a whole bunch of different things. I just kind of had kept it kind of separate. Like, mediumship is specifically connecting with people's past loved ones.
Okay.
And then, like, also, I mean, it's kind of a fine line and a little confusing anyway. So it's not, but also the channeling is like bringing information in. So whether it's from like people's past loved ones or spirits, I mean,
Okay.
like angels.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. So that makes more sense. And so when the first happened, you just got Archangel Raphael that came to you. And now you're going to, so in my mind, that seems like they just chose you, but now you're going to actively sort of choose who you try to channel now, right?
Yes, and you can.
Okay.
And so, of course, I'm currently in a class on learning about archangels, gods, and
That's
goddesses. You
That's so
know?
cool. Like,
Yeah,
I mean,
and
I wouldn't even know where to start finding those kinds of, well, I mean,
I
I do more now, but like, where do people
I
even
trust
start
me,
with
I
that?
wasn't
But
looking for this class. It showed up in my email inbox, and I was like, "Oh, archangel a class on archangels and gods and goddesses. Like, maybe I should look into this." And ironically, the woman who teaches it used to practice law,
we're everywhere.
and she's
Wow.
from Australia. You know, I was just watching like the intro about what the class was going to be about, and she said she was an attorney who channels archangels, and I was like, "Oh, I'm in."
And you're like, yeah, exactly. Well, so how do you keep malevolent or bad or spirits trying to get through you or talk to you or anything? Or do you let them? I mean, I don't know. How does that work?
Yeah, so very interestingly enough, it's funny because we were supposed to do this podcast last week and we had to postpone it, and now
Right?
we're doing
Yeah.
it this week. And literally, the class that I learned the other day that I wouldn't have had the information from, I can now share. But
Oh,
so,
perfect.
yeah, the class was actually on how to keep other like not light beings out, and so there's just different kind of rules and things like, um, gosh, it's almost like, I mean, she went through a whole list of them, so it's kind of hard to explain, but, generally, if you're working from in my experience, like, with, like, light and something of good, it feels different. It can feel different. Sometimes the things that they say might not sound right. Like, I remember one time I was writing something and I was like, "This just seems a little too negative to be," and so I just stopped. I was like, "I'm not doing this." So I feel like using your intuition and also just knowing, like, sometimes if it just feels off, if you're talking to somebody who you're like, this doesn't feel quite right," like, same type of
Yes.
thing.
Yes. Okay. And so you can feel it and just be like, nope, absolutely
Yep.
not. Well, then how, okay, so that's how you protect yourself from that. But what about just, I mean, it sounds like constant channeling or constant working with loved ones or past loved ones, etc., like would be just sort of draining, sort of body draining or emotionally draining or anything. I mean, even just, and this is completely not comparable by any means, but just being like in customer service all day, pleasing people was draining, right?
Right.
So what safeguards or how do you work with that, or does that not happen? I mean, it just seems like it would.
It certainly can happen, and there was a time where I was doing, like, private mediumship reading after mediumship reading, and that was definitely exhausting, and I found that with one-on-ones, like, it's a bit different for me than a group. Like, a group is easier in the sense of, like, energetically, I don't know even why, but for some reason, I feel like when I work one-on-one, I'm, like, it takes more energy for me versus, like, having a group, so I like that because more people can get messages in, like, a shorter amount of time. But then, like, in groups, it at the end, it'll feel kind of draining, but also because of being in a higher vibration and doing something that I really feel like I'm in service of, like, it definitely can give me energy too. So, those activities where you're like, oh, I love doing this and it gives me energy. And like, you think I would be exhausted,
Yes.
but because it's the right thing, it actually gives you energy. That's how I feel about this when I do groups. When I do one-on-ones after a lot of them, I'm like, oh, that might not be the right thing for me.
Right. Or you need to take a step back. Well, that
Yeah.
I love how you just explained it that way because you're exactly right. Like when you feel good afterwards, even though you should be exhausted, or you may still be exhausted, but you feel good about it, and then knowing
Yes.
it's the right thing, that's exactly how, I mean, side note, I don't know, I didn't mention it to you, but the listeners know that I create custom jewelry. I make custom fine jewelry. And every time, even if it's just like sort of a long process or I've been dealing with a problem in it or whatever, but when the final piece comes out, I feel so good about all of it. So that's how I know, like, after a long day of work before, I'd come home and I'd just be miserable that I'd have to go again. You know what I mean? So that's how,
Right.
just like you were mentioning, I can feel the difference in the path that I'm on now, especially in getting to, be more myself. than in a corporate
Correct.
world, like getting to
Yeah.
express myself and everything. So I feel it. And so that's why I love the way that you put that, because I definitely resonate with it. And if I do, others will.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yeah.
So then what can you tell us? I purposely didn't say anything about this before, but how, because you remember you mentioned it's kind of almost like an out of body experience, but like it's coming out, but it's not your words or things like that. So how does it come out?
So when I channel Archangel Raphael, it often shows up in rhymes. And that to me was
This
like
is so cool.
such a funny thing because I have never tried to write poetry, or maybe I did when I was a kid and I was like, well, this is terrible. Like, I can't, this is not for me. And I was discovering it with Archangel Raphael. Like, it will often come out like in rhymes. And when I write, it'll rhyme. And so that was actually one of the things I got in one of my automatic writing sessions was like, it's me because I rhyme. And so actually how we got
Mm.
connected, I sat down and was like, well, let me channel this post for this Facebook group on podcast and see what happens. And it started coming out in rhymes. And I was like, I was definitely nervous to post it because I was like, well, this seems so silly. I just wrote this post, rhymey post, but let's go ahead
Oh,
and
I
see
thought it
what
was
happens.
awesome.
And that's what I like had the intention of like, if this is it'll land with the people that it's supposed to land with, and it won't with the people it's not. And it'll save us all time, you know? So yeah, so it comes out in rhymes, which is pretty fun because that's how I'm like, okay, for sure I'm connected because I don't know the last time I put a rhyme together, if ever.
Oh, that's so cool. And yes, for just listeners, that is exactly how Kristen and I connected. She posted it and the rhyming, the ex attorney, I was like, yes, please, immediately. So really cool. I mean, if you hadn't done that, we wouldn't be here. So, and I love the
Crazy.
piece that you just mentioned that like the ones it resonates with will connect and the ones that don't. I mean, that's something just we've mentioned in the past on the podcast is just not forcing, like you said, people to, follow your beliefs, which a big thing is when we have alternative from what, society usually considers typical in quotes,
Right.
interests or beliefs, then, we usually are understanding that people have different ones and not usually trying to push it on people versus the other way when they don't have it. And they're like, you have to be this way. If
Right.
that even made sense. Anyway, but
I know what
how
you
to
mean.
just either, yeah, okay, good. But just how to like just be like, well, not everyone has to like me and not everyone has to like what I do, and that's okay. So that's exactly what you were saying in that way. So try to like make that connection is like you're there, you've got that, and we hear it over and over from people that are here. And I just wanted to reiterate for our listeners, like it's okay. It's okay for not everyone to be either your client or your friend or like what you say or anything. So
And on that, I will
accepting that.
also say, like, it's also a work in progress for me too. Like, it can be challenging to not be liked or accepted for something that's really part of who I am. That's sometimes like, wow, they really think I do some wacky stuff, but then it's like that's okay. So it's still it's challenging for me sometimes, and I'm working through that as well. So it's like every time I do something like write the post and put it anyway, like it's like those little baby steps start to make me go, oh, okay, I see, and so yeah, it's not necessarily easy.
It definitely isn't. I mean, again, you said work in progress. I mean, it's the same for me always. I mean, I talk about like finally expressing myself and everything, but even when I launched this company by jewelry design, which isn't even 1 year old yet, I was trying to do to the masses. Like, oh, I can make anything, which I can, for anybody and any likes. And I made my website bridally looking, etc. And then when I was making more alternative, which is the direction I'm heading now, it's more like, oh, well, yes, but I can also do it like this. And it's finally just feel like, no, you can go to, Jack and Jill jewelry store if you're just looking for nothing, just something out of the case. Like if you want meaning in it, that's where I am. So it's learning to say that no, or even just realizing that it's okay that I'm not helping everyone. So
Yeah, and you're helping the right people.
Exactly. The ones that went through the experience I went through when I got engaged or was looking for jewelry or just in general, not able to find things that I like. So work in progress for me too. It probably never goes away. So you did give us actually 2 awesome pieces of advice already, but I always like to ask at the end if you have any. Well, so you already gave our listeners some advice, right? About not ignoring any signs or like just paying attention and following the breadcrumbs, and then just what we just talked about as well. But what about advice or any tips for people who may be in a situation like you, like don't realize what's happening to them, or if they want to learn more about it or think they have that, like where should they go? Like you're finding all these classes, etc. Like what kind of advice do you have for anyone like that?
Yeah, I think that if there's any piece of you that's kind of like, I feel like that resonates or there's something there, like trust that. That's your intuition. We all have intuition. And so if you're getting that nudge, and trust me, it's a whole lot easier to follow the nudge than getting hit by the 2x4. Been there. Um, Follow the nudge.
Cool.
Don't wait for the 2x4. And I mean, honestly, like I've done a lot of research online. Not everything is great. Some things are awesome, so it's sometimes, I can also be a resource because I've had good experiences and I've had some not good experiences, but also maybe that was part of the learning that I needed to have. So I don't like to say for people one way or the other, like,
Sure.
some of that is all part of our experience. So for me, I think the biggest thing is, and especially coming from like, corporate and legal, and I found a lot of the people that once I started doing this, there's a lot of female attorneys out there who have this. That's why they're very good at their job because they use their intuition on things. So if there's something that's in you giving you a nudge, like investigate it further, because there's a reason you're feeling it.
And so, okay, I love it. And we're going to put all of your information and everything in the notes below the episode anyway. But I know you mentioned your group mediumship. I know you mentioned one-on-one. What other kinds of services or things do you want people to know if they want to reach out to you or use your abilities?
Sure. So work in progress. This is my newest offering, which I'm super excited about. Is I'm also a flight attendant. And I do this so I can fly for free anywhere to do groups in person. So if you've actually wanted to ever do a group in person, I can come to you. But I have launched the flying medium, and now that will make more sense. So the newest offering is actually doing a one-on-one reading to connect and see where might be a good place for you to travel if you're interested in traveling. And then I actually have the ability to book all that travel for somebody. So, maybe, and I just got back from running a half marathon in Spain and in Madrid and had like a really cool experience. And so like having that conversation to see where maybe a good travel place would be and then booking that and then providing clients with that type of experience.
That is, I don't think, well, maybe there is, but I don't think I've ever heard of such a thing. And that sounds incredible. Like being into knowing exactly what kind of thing they're going to want and then having someone make that for you. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, I'm super excited. It's fairly new, the flying medium, fairly new. I mean, I broke my foot shortly after I got back from the Madrid run. And so through that time was how the flying medium came to me. And so it's new. But again, like I'm excited. And that's why I think that on this path, we can continue evolving for the thing that is, it's for now. You never know what's going to happen beyond that as well.
Yeah. All right. So most of the people or most of the things that you can serve is, yes, obviously this new, the flying medium, and helping people get in touch with, or just your mediumship abilities with lost loved ones. Are there any services or things that you can offer that I missed? So I want to make sure everybody knows.
Well, actually, also the Archangel Raphael channeling as well. Like if somebody wants a channeled message from Archangel Raphael, I can do that too. So if you want to hear from your past loved ones, I can do that. If you want to hear from Archangel Raphael, I can do that. And if you want a travel adventure, well, I can do that.
Those are some very unique offers. I love that. I mean, we've had psychics and mediums on here before, but nothing about the channeling the Archangel Raphael and this new travel thing. So that's really exciting. Of all the information below. So we're gonna wrap up. I've got so many fun things that I can't wait to learn more about because I don't even know who the Archangel Raphael is, right? Which is how you kind of explained it when it was happening to you. So like learning that and what was happening. So that's really well, I just research everything when I finish these podcasts because I feel like I learned so much stuff. So is there anything I missed that you want to share with everyone?
No, and I mean, you can go research, and for the audience. So Archangel Raphael is actually the archangel who helps with healing. So physical, emotional, energetic healing, as well as with travel. So if you get nervous when you fly, you can invoke Archangel Raphael, or if those are the cliff notes of what he does. But if you take some research, you'll learn a lot more, but that's the basic parts.
But that makes perfect sense based on the things that you've talked about in your offerings.
Crazy, right?
With the person's finger. Yeah. So Oh, and no wonder with your like being at peace or feeling happy even when you're exhausted, like that, just all of that now makes even more sense that you said that. Okay, well, thank you for sharing.
Sure.
So I'm going to put all the information that Kristen has given us, like usual, in the show notes, how to reach out to her, etc. And then definitely go ahead if you haven't, follow us, follow her, like, share. Okay, always there's something in these podcasts that I'm sure someone in your life can resonate with. So please share it with people. Follow, subscribe. Like that's how we keep going and get the message out there for people so they can get there and learn these things and recognize these things before they spend 20 years in the wrong industry like we just did, right? So
Totally.
we want to get the message out there sooner. So thank you all for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye for now.